Hello and welcome back to the Elijah Rising podcast. My name is Micah Gamboa, and today I have a very exciting guest for you. I'm joined by Ellen, the Executive Director of Passages Treatment Center for Women. I'm really excited to dive into our content today, Ellen. It's an honor to have you here. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to talk about recovery.
Yeah, there's so many who are in our community who are faced with the issues that come with women in addiction.
Correct.
And so today is going to be really educational, I think informative, and probably open a door to a world that many haven't experienced yet.
Exactly.
So can you tell us, you hold so many credentials and accolades, not to mention the decades of experience that you carry. Would you mind telling us and our listeners a little bit about yourself today?
Sure. I've worked in addiction for over 40 years. I've had the honor of working with women during the whole time, which has been amazing. I've had an opportunity to look at changes, and I've had an opportunity to look at dealing with the women, working with the women in terms of we're a pretty intricate part of who we are. I mean, and there's I look at recovery, and when I worked with the women, as a tapestry, and you roll that out, and there's bright colors and there's some dark colors in there.
Yeah.
And there's some knots. And so at Passages, we worked at looking at that and honoring who they were and empowering them to make some differences. Maybe untangle the knots, maybe put more vibrant colors in there, maybe offer hope, and a sense of belonging to a particular, if you will, a particular group that focuses on living well.
That's such a beautiful way to put it. Yeah. What an honoring picture. I love that. I might steal that from you, Ellen.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
You're being so humble. She's being incredibly humble as well, because you are a licensed chemical dependency counselor.
Right.
You're a certified employee assistance professional, a substance abuse counselor, and so many other credentials that you hold in this field I probably couldn't even list. But you've worked for over 40 years with women, and specifically in addiction.
Right.
Wow, what a legacy. What an incredible honor.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
You know, when I started out, or when we as peers started out in the field, it was chemical dependency was really kind of geared towards alcohol. And then over the years, it's alcohol and it's drugs. And then from that, we're looking at the mental health piece that's
Right.
That is wound around all of that. So it's been a journey for myself to learn what is going on and what the women need, and it's been a transition for me to kind of let go of biases and things like that, and just really look at the person from the inside out, what they might be feeling, what they might be experiencing, and just in fact our name is Passages, and if you look at that, Passages is a door. I mean, it's a step into the unknown, and it's not easy, but it's a step for change.
I love that. Yeah. That's so true. That journey of recovery or healing, coming out of your trauma, coming into the unknown, it's very difficult. And I think people, who maybe don't work in the social services sector may not realize what a challenge it is for individuals who are caught up, whether it's addiction, whether it's trafficking, homelessness, to make that leap from the world that they know into the world that they don't know.
Right.
It's a challenge.
Well, and, when women come in, we have to build trust. Until they trust, they have to trust us. But they also have to trust themselves.
Yeah, that's so good.
And allow themselves to feel the hope.
Yeah.
One of the things that we leave out a lot when we're talking is that, the women that we worked with, we focused on the women, but we also focused on the families too. I mean, there was, it's somebody's mother or somebody's wife or grandmother, aunt, or a teacher or, a doctor.
Yeah.
And we worked with them too. We brought them into the circle when it was time. And it was a lot of education for most to just understand what addiction is and what recovery can look like.
Sure, absolutely. It's a different world. Yeah.
I believe it's a disease. It's been proven that it's a disease. And with that disease comes, the shame and the guilt and all that. That's just part of the disease.
The social stigma and all of that. Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about Passages? What do you guys do? How do you work? What's your framework?
Passages is a residential treatment program. It was located in Spring Branch. And we our referrals came from all over the country at some point. And again, things change. Managed care comes in, insurance, a lot of changes just on that side of the piece. But generally the women came in and they were usually coming from detox or jail or a suicide attempt or, or a loved one saying, I can't do this. Or them saying, I really can't do this. Dying feels much better, than doing this. Yeah. So we look at each one of them individually, and they come into Passages. It was a 90-day program, and from that there was counseling, a lot of peer support. They were lucky. Some of them were lucky enough to have psychiatrists or other mental health people to help them along the way. And of course, the foundation of our program has always been, it's God's plan. That's what I always say. And the 12-step focus was our foundation, and that was also led by what people may assume is a higher power. Yeah. So that's pretty much what we did. The women learned some job skills, how to interview. They really learned how to look someone in the face and not feel like they should turn away. And they learned not to run, to look at it first, look at the big picture, not just that knee-jerk reaction to get away. Yeah. Yeah.
I love that.
And they learned to kind of look at people in their lives that may not be so healthy, or, their tendencies in relationships, to look at the same pattern over and over again. And where does that come from? The biggest part for all of us is the trauma piece. Yeah. And, you as Elijah Rising representative or whatever, and me, we have to look at the trauma, because that really is also the soul wound that we look at first. We just see it.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like your program was very holistic, very individualized care, which is so similar to how we operate. Every person is an individual. I mean, like you're talking about, they have different trauma history. They have different addictions even, which manifest different ways. Right. And all of the coping strategies and all of those things come together to form such a unique picture. But you can't there's not one blanket solution.
No, there's not.
Excuse me.
That's okay. And many of the women, come with the idea that it's not going to work. It hasn't worked before. Right. Or some came that have never tried it before. And it doesn't mean that, they didn't hit speed bumps and, they would complete the program. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're cured or, we have a victory. Yeah. We have a change. And that's, one of the questions that I've never liked to answer in my whole 40 years is, what's your success rate?
Oh, yeah. Yes, that's a very hard question to answer, and it's posed in a very unique way. It makes it challenging.
Yeah. But funders and all that want to know. And I have to, really kind of try to lean it towards how much change have we seen at Passages over the years. We used to say we were planting seeds. Some of them would grow and some of them would be weeds. Yeah. But, we've had people that have gone through the program, had some years sober or even a short time sober, and they may, hit a speed bump and relapse. And so we would take them into conversation or a meeting and say, this really isn't about failure. It's about looking at what you stopped doing. Because I think recovery, there's a maintenance plan. Yes. Just like a diabetic takes their meds, in recovery, we have a maintenance plan, and that's, some it's prayer, some's going to 12-step meetings, making sure you have a good support group, taking your medications when you need them, staying away from people that are not so good for us, and looking at some of our patterns before we get to them. I'm a firm believer in looking at problems upstream before they roll downstream.
Yeah. I love that. So how would you say that you would define success? Because that goes along with your success rate, right? How do you define success? It sounds like progress.
Yeah, progress, change. If a woman, number one, level of sobriety. If they get a day sober,
you celebrate it.
Yeah, I celebrate
for
that.
Sure.
Yeah, when they get a year, we have a party.
Yeah.
But we look at it and change just in terms of who they are. If they can look in the mirror and say, I'm not awful.
Yeah.
No one loves me.
Yeah.
Why should I do this? No one cares. Okay. If they can do that, if they can make a phone call to their mother that they haven't spoken to and have no expectations of what they might hear, just because they did it because they wanted to.
Yeah.
Changes as far as work, peers, and some aliveness. I like to see the aliveness in people. And you see that during the time that they're at Passages. And the ones that come back for alumni, you see that still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And you guys have served so many women, over 2,000.
Yes.
And so you're still receiving, I'm sure, calls and letters and testimonies, really, of the work that you guys have done.
Right. And, it's humbling to us to hear from alumni, and whether they need us or whether they're telling us that they finished their master's program,
What amazing.
It's just, it's like that's the shot in the arm for us.
Yeah.
It's like, that's why we're here. That's why we do that. I've always said we don't take credit for the ones that make it, so we don't bear the burden for the ones that don't.
Words of wisdom. Yeah, that's words of wisdom. Something that when we were reevaluating our program, we initially said, we want them to, get their GEDs or go back to school and have this, that, and the other. Like 10 things, right? Yeah. Amazing life success. And I was like, okay, first of all, some of us in this room aren't even exemplifying all of these characteristics. And we don't have control over those things, right? So success cannot be dependent. Those things cannot be the measure of success for us because we will continually be a failure.
Right.
And so we have to let them walk their own journey. Anyway, I'm just so in agreement with how you're saying that because that's such words of wisdom. I think it sustains you in this work long term. So can you, and I don't know if we really have a perfect answer to this, but can you talk to us a little bit about the intersection? We're talking here on an Elijah Rising trafficking podcast, right?
Right.
Why does addiction matter to this work? How do they intersect?
Because addiction is a roadblock. It's a roadblock to what you call success or to what I call change.
Yeah.
It's a roadblock. And so unless we deal with our addiction, which really holds the shame and the guilt and the insecurities and not an opportunity to empower ourselves or others, that's what the addiction holds hostage. And that's what it does. It holds us hostage. Yeah. And until we learn to respect the addiction and maintain it, deal with it, I think that we're always going to be there. And part of that is looking at the trauma pieces, looking at the soul wounds, looking at the things that we've never spoke out loud.
Yeah.
And as far as Elijah Rising and Passages, it was a good meeting of the minds, if you will, because that's exactly what you do.
Yeah.
Along with taking the women out of the difficult situations, you look at addiction, and that's important. And, the work you do is wonderful, but if you don't bring the addiction care, if you will, into that, then what you're doing is just what you're doing. You're not preparing them for later.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And we know, just statistically speaking, the vast majority of women who are in a trafficking situation are also facing issues with addiction. Yes. And we see, it's hard to say, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Does addiction comes first and then, traffickers exploit that? That happens. Or maybe they're trafficked first and then their pimp utilizes the weapon of addiction and forces them into addiction in order to keep them subjugated, essentially, or in, some measure of control. But either way, it doesn't really matter. All of that history doesn't matter. We just have to look at, okay, where are we right now? And what does she really need in order to overcome and move into a healthy, independent life? So my last question before the break are, if you think about some of the challenges that you face in this work, would you be willing to share with our listeners? Maybe there's some people out there who are thinking about entering this sector. Just give a real picture of maybe some of the challenges.
challenges
in addiction recovery, in this kind of work as you're walking with individuals, maybe?
From our point of view, from Passages' point of view, I think that some of the roadblocks or some of the stressors would just be about how much you give of yourself to that person. Even though we have therapists on our own and we have people, peers that say, hey, you know, it should end. You can't help but bring it with you. You kind of wear it as a heavy coat, you know. And I think that it's important that people in the field really look at themselves too.
Yes.
You know, the best counselors and therapists, even the recovery coaches early on that have therapists or someone that they talk to are, you know, can make it a lot longer than those that just jump in because I'm sober and I want to help people, you know. First, you got to help yourself. And you have to, like I talked earlier, is that you have to honor the successes, if you want to use that word, but you also have to respect that sometimes that won't happen, you know. And we've lost alumni. We've lost alumni to suicide or to being in their addiction, going back into their addiction. So it's really, really hard.
It is hard. Yeah, I think that's such a good advice. It's like the oxygen mask analogy, you know, but you are faced in this work, and I imagine it's so similar in addiction because you're unpacking trauma, you're walking with them through one of the hardest parts of their lives, to not carry it, to not let it weigh on you, to not pick it up as an emotional, you know, baggage or what have you. So I love that analogy. I think that's words of wisdom.
And Passages was fortunate to have, you know, a variety of staff. So we had staff that were in recovery. We had staff that grew up in the chaos of, you know, an alcoholic family. And so we were able to kind of offer different things to different, you know, like we'd see that and we'd be really very careful for transference, you know, or if I noticed it in the staff, we would have a discussion. And it's really, at that point, they were really not looking at themselves. You know, they were looking at the other person, like trying to prevent them from going through anything that they had gone through. Yeah. So we would recircle back to like, look at what's yours and what's theirs, you know, and what's appropriate to disclose. You know, and go to a meeting.
And take care of yourself and do your maintenance. So we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come right back into it.
Sure.
Hey, thank you for listening to the Elijah Rising podcast. If this episode has impacted you in any way, let us know. Go on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, or go to our website and send us a message. Let us know how these episodes have impacted you. And we provide this podcast and our services of doing outreach into the community and bringing awareness to human trafficking and 24/7 housing. We provide all of this free of charge. And we're only able to do that because people make donations and people support and get behind this work. And so if you want to be a part of that, you can go to elijahrising.org/donate. And giving $10 or $20 a month goes a really long way. And I would encourage you to take that step and join us in the work to end sex trafficking.
We're back with the Elijah Rising podcast here with Ellen from Passages. So Ellen, can we hear from you maybe a story of, I don't know, victory or a testimony, some word of encouragement that you've seen through your time at Passages?
There's several.
Yes.
I can go all the way back to 30 years ago. You know, 32 years ago, my first client is sober.
Wow.
And she works in the field.
Wow, amazing.
Yes, and for a while she helped us in groups and things like that. And she's still, you know, she's 70-something years old, and she's still, you know, in the program, if you will. And then, you know, at one point in our little journey, we had several girls, 18 to 24, for a period of time. That was kind of part of our population. And from that, you know, they would come kicking and screaming because they had better things to do than continue their recovery. They agreed to 30 days inpatient, you know, or lose going to college or whatever because their parents didn't know what to do. And part of the counsel to the parents is they need extended care. You know, they don't need to go back home. be with their friends.
Yep.
They need extended care. So unfortunately, it would be in Houston, where when they came in July, they thought they had come to hell, because it was so hot.
Recognize that.
But, several of them ended up staying, and they would say, besides, learning what recovery is and learning to speak about their soul wounds and feel empowered, they also learned a bit of structure. Just the simple things of having chores or making your beds. I've taught girls how to make their beds because they've never had to. Yeah. And then I have them come back years later saying, I still make my bed. And I said, well, I'm really glad I've done something for you. But they're in recovery. And we've had girls that stayed in Houston, and one particularly who finished her degree and had a child, got married, and actually is a nurse now. Wow. So those are not victories, because I like to look at changes. Yeah. But there are changes from where they first came kicking and screaming to where they are today.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I know you have so many stories that you probably can't even remember them all, I think any of those stages, like you said, stages of like the change that you see, 2 weeks sober, 2 years sober, those are victories, those are triumphs. Sober. 30 years.
Yeah.
It's like, and you were talking about making the bed. And I love that, because I think for those, again, who maybe aren't in this work or aren't in this work firsthand, it's hard to describe the totality of the work that this entails, right? Like the work that we do on a day-to-day basis, because, we've had women who come in and just their home life, their history has been so chaotic, so difficult. Maybe they faced abuse or neglect, right? And they didn't know how to go grocery shopping or do laundry or and that's not everyone, for sure. That's not, I'm painting with a big broad brush right now, but those are some of the things that you go, okay, this is now in my job description, right? Because we are caring for the individual.
Exactly.
And her needs matter.
Exactly. Because they didn't get that note.
And it's critical for them living a successful, independent life.
Well, it's one thing they can get up and do and say, I did that. Yeah. It's an affirmation that I was capable, or I was in a place that let me do that. Yeah. Freely.
Yeah. Responsible, and it boosts some kind of serotonin, dopamine thing in your brain, right? You did it, you accomplished it.
Yeah. My alumni that has over 30 years states that I was the first person who taught her that no means no. You don't need a story, it just means no.
Yeah.
And it was done, with love and respect, not at all shame. But she had never heard that. It was usually a way to negotiate around what you wanted.
Yeah, absolutely.
And those are really important life lessons that you bring to, for me, the women in recovery.
Absolutely.
Right.
Healthy relationships, boundaries, right? Healthy communication.
Yeah. Well, they don't have to like it, but they can just look at it,
Yeah. So. Man, I love this so much. I feel like we could share stories all day long.
We probably could.
So Elijah Rising was one of the few organizations that was awarded a very generous grant from Passages. Would you like to share with us why you chose Elijah Rising? And I know there was a board around you as well. But what was your intent behind that, and how do our organizations kind of align?
I think that the board, and I was included in that, kind of looked at the big picture, or what's going on in Houston. There aren't a lot of women's treatment programs, specifically for women was one thing. And didn't want to look at an institution kind of thing, but where would our dollars go to directly support women and the work that, say, Elijah Rising does as far as dealing with women. Yeah. We talked a lot about recovery and trauma, and there was a correlation with Passages women and trafficking. Many of them, when you got through the different layers going down deep, they were trafficked. Whether it was not a family member, but some of them were family members. Yeah. And they just kind of got into that cycle and couldn't get out. And substances, alcohol, drugs, was an easy way to dull that pain.
100%. Yeah.
And you know that for a fact.
Yeah.
Even with the mental health piece, when you were talking about the chicken and the egg, we don't know what came first, because most addicts and alcoholics were numbing their mental health issues with drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
So Passages looked at that, like who would carry the torch, if you will. And we didn't have tons of money, but we wanted it to correlate with the mission of Passages, and that was, providing a therapeutic environment for women in recovery.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what y'all do.
Yeah.
So, and the choices did not come easy. It wasn't like, 2 and we're done. I mean, we got several asks, and we visited, and we came to you, quite frankly, and we really left feeling like we knew this place. We were a part of this place. There's still that level of privacy, which we didn't cross over, but we knew it felt like you were doing the work that you said you were doing,
Thank you.
Yeah, we met with Courtney again.
Yeah.
And there was paperwork and budgets and all that. I mean, it was a process.
Absolutely.
But in the end, y'all floated to the top.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, we are so grateful. And just for our listeners, and you already know this, but the gift that you guys granted us is going to enable us to actually increase our case management, our addiction recovery services, and build out some more spaces to enable that to happen. As you know, sometimes those come few and far between.
Yes.
We work I feel like in nonprofit, you just work with what you got, right? So we're really, really honored to be able to what we hope to be able to do is carry the legacy forward of what Passages has entrusted to us and really deposited in this community, the Houston area, for 32 years. It's really incredible. So we're so grateful for you guys.
Yeah.
So Ellen, can you tell us a little bit more, anything else that you think around the addiction recovery space that we haven't touched on that's important maybe for our listeners to know or understand?
I'm thinking for a minute. If you look at the big picture, I really go back to the tapestry analogy because that's what, to me, I see when I see a woman, And I think you just have to look at the different components of that, and not on a clinical serious level, but on a human level.
Yeah.
Like, look at that person, and take what you get and don't pitch a fit. Do not try to change them, even though I love changes, but to guide them so they make the changes.
Yeah.
If you impose treatment, push treatment, we're going to run. That's a human nature kind of thing. But when you allow it, when you allow people to understand it and begin to trust it and feel like they're kind of worthy of it, then there's a lot more changes that happen from that.
Yeah. Like a winsome invitation instead of, you're not trying to force, coerce, which is kind of the work that we do too. We say, these people that we are in the business of assisting our adults, they have volition. We want to honor their autonomy. And we want to give a winsome invitation so that they're eager to participate.
Well, and in terms of the grant that Passages gave y'all, when you spoke about empowering more women and having the space, then people sometimes, our donors, sometimes don't think that it takes space to put, and it takes chairs to put the butts in the chairs so that you can talk to people. Things like that to expand your program. There's a lot of facets to it.
There are.
Y'all have an incredibly strong mission and a strong foundation, and I've met the staff, and they're amazing, and it's much like Passages staff. We were few, but we were fierce. And I'm grateful for my board of directors because they are the one that has kind of driven this to where we are now. And the gifts and the guidance and such like that. I could not have done what I've done for so many years without the board of directors.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I was blessed to have an incredibly, 10 incredibly women, one man, and they were always there. I always said it's like you come, but you can't leave, because, and so for such a small board, we did well. Because everyone on the board shared that passion about that. They believed in the mission, and that's what's so important is to, if you believe in the mission, then you can believe it can be done.
Absolutely. Yeah, you need people like that in your corner. It takes a really strong team.
Yeah, just like Elijah Rising, we believed in your mission, and we know you'll get it done.
What an honor. It's an honor to carry on your legacy and really learn. I feel like we have so much to learn really from you and from the others who have paved the ways. You touched on this earlier, but, and I kind of want to go back to it. I don't remember exactly how you said it, but you learned so much through this journey, right? When you first started, it was only about alcohol, and then it became about drugs and alcohol, and then mental health and the brain, I'm sure. So we are in that, we were kind of going down the same road. We're just entering it a little further downstream.
Right.
And we're still learning so much about trauma and the brain and the body and the soul, like you're talking about all those woundings and how they interact and kind of meld together to create this unique individual situation with this person, you know? So what an honor to be able to carry on that learning legacy. You know, we still have to learn, and we always have to grow and adapt.
Right.
Anything else that we haven't talked about that I haven't touched on that you'd like our listeners to know?
I'm sure when we sign off, I'll say, we
darn.
should have said this or that. You know, I guess in closing, I'm really grateful for my experience at Passages, you know, and I hold all the women close to my heart, and I will continue to work with women. You know, I don't feel like I'm done yet, and I'm really, you know, I'm really esteemed to know that Elijah Rising is going to move forward. And when you talked about you're a little bit, this is my word, a little late in the game, but it's important. It's like now people are opening their eyes and realizing that that really does happen.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it really can happen to anybody.
Yeah.
You know, like no one asks for it.
Exactly.
It happens.
Yeah.
You know? So with that, you know, it's a good legacy. It's a good legacy to know that that will continue. And the only other thing I'd want to say is that it's really important to take care of yourself.
Good words of wisdom. Because you want to be able to last.
Yeah.
We want to last in this work.
Yeah.
We
the
do.
rest will follow, but take care of yourself first.
Yes. That's such good advice. So many of us young ones can learn from that. You know, I feel like I just got a hard lesson over the last year. Like, okay, if I'm looking at the long game now, right? We want to be able to last and to be able to raise up people behind us who will continue the work.
Well, and that's what, you know, in recovery, people have, you know, their goals and their objectives. And like you talked about 10 things before. And, you know, I've learned over the years, it's just to allow the women to kind of lean into their recovery, you know, lean into the anger, lean into the trauma and the soul wounds, you know, and we look at them and we honor them and we take the strength that we had to get through them and we leave the rest behind, you know. And sometimes that's forgiving people that we'll never see or never want to see, but it's forgiving them, you know, so that we can move forward, because that really traps us a lot of times.
Yeah, and it traps us as staff.
Yeah.
It traps us as helpers. All of those things.
We can really be held hostage by our anger, anger of others.
Yeah, absolutely. It's critical to, you know, one of our coworkers would always say, like, it's unfair, it's unjust for us to ask those that we're helping to face their hardest trauma to go through that process if we're unwilling to do it ourselves.
Right.
Which is such wisdom. It's so true, because we can only offer what we've overcome, right? We've gained authority in. And so we are all on this journey of healing, staff and clients alike. We are not, there's not us versus them. One's not higher than another. We have to see ourselves as both. We are on a different path maybe, but we are both facing our historical trauma. You know, we have to be willing to go down that healing path. So,
well, I think that's true. I think that, you know, our women's issues do not have to be ours. Our issues do not have to be theirs.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
And we've talked about guiding them. And so we have to guide ourselves too, or have people that we trust to help us guide us. I mean, nobody does it alone.
That's right.
Recovery's not alone if you think about it.
Yeah.
You know?
It's a community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a disease. And so you have to maintain that. And you lean into it and respect it. You know?
Yeah.
You have to
That's really
respect
good.
it.
That's really good. And there's so much deeper we could go in the recovery, the story of recovery, the journey. I hope that we can continue this conversation maybe another time. But Ellen, it was such an honor to have you. We just respect you so much for the work that you've done and what you'll continue to do, and hope that we can continue to learn from you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And that wraps up our Elijah Rising podcast for today. Be sure to subscribe and like and follow so you can be privy to all the new content that comes out. Thanks so much.